Young adult literature is a genre of writing that many people have speculations about. It has no precise definition, which leads its specifications up to the party at hand's interpretation. The worth of a book is to be measured by what you can carry away from it. However, different people are likely to view and value literary works differently, depending on the experiences and background that they bring to that book. This inquiry is initially based on differentiating between children's literature and young adult literature. Unfortunately, upon my research, I found the task to be quite difficult, and a lot of my questions remain unanswered. Although I have not been completely shown the light, I'll share with you what I have found by first taking a look at the definitions and characteristics for both categories of books, and then I will compare children's books, which will be represented by John Newbery Award-winning books, to young adult lit novels, which will be represented by books we read in class this semester. I would also like to pinpoint the bumps I came across during my inquiry. The first thing to be examined is the definition of young adult literature, which is where the controversy truly lies. I have been unable to find one solid or complete definition, so I share with you some that I have found. First, I'll start with the not-so-official definitions I've found for young adult literature. First, I found on an Iowa State University professor's syllabus. He defined young adult literature as, quote, literature written for and marketed to young adults. Simple enough, right? Another definition I found is stated here. Books selected for reading by young adults ages 13 to 18. Whether published specifically for them or for the general adult public. Also, adolescent literature includes many types of books in which the protagonist is usually a teenager. A little more specific, but still. Dissatisfied with these incomplete findings, I decided to go straight to the heart of the matter. I attempted to go to the Young Adult Library Services Association website, which is a branch of the ALA, to look for the term young adult literature. What I found was no definition, but more of a rationale. They believed the term young adult literature should be broken up into two parts, as the young adult part and the literature part. They believed that these were dynamic parts and that they changed with culture and with society. What I'm about to read to you is an excerpt from their website explaining what they think is the definition of young adult literature. Quote, when the term first found common usage in the 1960s, it referred to the realistic fiction that was set in the real, as opposed to imagined, contemporary world and addressed problems, issues, and life circumstances of interest to young readers, aged approximately 12 to 18. Such titles were issued by the Children's Book Division of American Publishers and were marketed to institutions, libraries, and schools that serve such populations. While some of this remains true today, much else has changed. In recent years, for example, the size of this population group has changed dramatically. Between 1990 and 2000, the number of persons between 12 and 18 soared to 32 million, a growth rate of 17%. That significantly outpaced the growth of the rest of the population. The size of the population segments has also increased as the conventional definition of young adult has expanded to include those as young as 10 and since the 1990s as old as 25. To me, these statements do not exactly prove to be conclusive. While exploring definitions of children's literature, I received definitions that subcategorize children's literature into 3 separate categories. 1. Books written for children, 2. Books chosen for children, and 3. Books chosen by children, which makes defining children's literature a bit easier. But the conflict I come to is the information I received when looking up ages. Children's books are said to be written for persons up to 12 years of age. Yet the ALA does one even better than young adult literature definition when it lists the criteria of a Newbery Award book, stating, quote, Children are defined as persons of ages up to and including 14 years in age, and books for this entire age range are to be considered. In summation, we have children who are up to 14 and adults that are from 10 to 25 years in age, which means we have some overlapping. And with this overlapping, it makes it easy for controversies to arise over where children's books stop and young adult lit books pick up, causing readers, parents, and authors to have different views. So just for clarity, children's lit is said to be from ages up to 14, and young adult lit can start as early as age 10 and go through age 25. This sparks a lot of controversy between authors, readers, and literary establishments like the ALA, like I stated earlier. One opinion I found on the matter that I found interesting was by Miss Ruth Carlson in an article that she wrote in the book Evaluating Books for Children and Young People. When speaking about teaching young adult lit to younger audiences, she responded by stating that, quote, "Some of the problems in reading controversial literature lie in the maturity level of the reader. Some adolescents are mature chronologically, but are unsophisticated experientially and socially. Ordinarily, a teenager is described as a child from 12 to 20 years of age. Many 12-year-olds are too young. They cannot possibly identify with the principal characters in some young adult books and are merely titillated by the sex scenes that some authors choose to write about." On the opposing side, I found a quote from Miss Susan Hinton, who is the author of the Outsiders book. She says, quote, "Children and teenagers know a lot today, not just things out of a textbook, but about living. They know their parents aren't Superman, and they know justice doesn't always win, and sometimes it's the bad guys who win. Writers needn't be afraid that they will shock the teenager audience, but give them something to hang on to." These issues are not rare. When speaking to people about what is children's literature and what is young adult literature, the who, what, where, when, how, and whys are very fuzzy to almost everybody I talk to. I even took a survey of my peers. I asked them if they thought that the age 10 was too young for young adult literature material that we read during class. Nearly 100% of them said yes, and when asked if 12 was too young, I got half and half. That evidence reinforces Miss Carlson's ideas. Before coming to my final conclusion, I decided to look at some of these characteristics on the list that we talked about in our class this semester. I then wanted to see if some of these characteristics correlated with some characteristics in books that were considered to be children's books. However, the problem I found with this was in a survey conducted by the ALA to show specific characteristics in Newbery Award-winning books. They did the survey on books from 1922 to the present, and they found they could not find sufficient evidence because the protagonists in the story and the other characteristics had changed, and they proved that children and readers of the Newbery Award winner is changing every year. So, I took the matters into my own hands and decided upon my findings based on what I have read and what I'm reading now. During my research, I read The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman, and it fits many of the characteristics of a young adult lit novel. Yet, in 2009, it won the Children's John Newbery Award. And then, in 2010, it won the Locust Award for Best Young Adult Novel. And it was cited by the ALA for, quote, "its delicious mix of murder, fantasy, horror, human longing," and it was noted for its magical, haunting prose. A book that was originally written for children, cited for its mix of murder, puts a whole spin on the children's literature thing, don't you think? To be conclusive, I've decided that this subject area of young adult literature versus children's literature isn't a battle at all, more of a collaboration. The controversies that stem over it will continue to battle it out as the ages continue. The truth is that ever since one of the enormous publication successes of J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter series Contemporary young adult literature has seen a rise in the appreciation by those who, in the past, might not have given young adult literature a second glance. That is not to say, however, that significant works categorized as young adult literature have not been out there, only that contemporary works that have been labeled as young adult tend to be ignored by many serious literary critics. Some still believe that young adult literature is merely a second category of childlike storytelling, and unworthy of serious literary evaluation, when in fact it is really an overlooked and underappreciated literary genre that has only recently begun to attract the critical attention that it deserves. For now, my deduction that young adult lit and children's lit have to work together will have to work. Through collaboration, we can come together, and hopefully establishments, parents, readers can come together and make the proper decision for the intended audiences of the children's literature and the young adult literary range.
I'm so in love with you. Whatever you want to do is alright with me. 'Cause you make me feel so brand new. I want to spend my life